Konami made a huge announcement on October 2022 when they announced the revival of Silent Hill, a return after a decade of no mainline game since Silent Hill Downpour. Fans of the series had been left wanting after PT was aborted and nothing was left in its place. But even before that, the series had been on a downward spiral after the first 4 games where the title was given over to external Western developers, none of which had been received positively, seen as pale imitations which failed to capture the heart and soul that was present in the first 3 games, and arguably the 4th. It was surprising then that in the 2022 announcement that it was revealed that each of these 4 new projects that marked the revival of the Silent Hill franchise would also be handled by external companies. These projects are the Silent Hill 2 remake by Bloober team, Silent Hill Townfall by No Code, Silent Hill Ascension, an interactive web series by GenVid Technologies, and the next mainline entry in the series, Silent Hill F by Neobards. Now, while people were mainly excited for these projects, they were always skeptical of Ascension, which was promised to be an interactive, communal experience. People had doubts how you could capture the spirit of a dark and gritty Silent Hill game that was to be driven by the community. And while those fears turned out to be true, no one was prepared for the monstrosity that Silent Hill Ascension ended up being. A mockery of the series, almost dystopian in its presentation, a Twitch-like chat, emotes, battle pass, and heavy monetization. I therefore find it very interesting that within 48 hours of Ascension launching and its subsequent backlash, Silent Hill 2 Remake went live for pre-orders very quickly. It is hard not to see this announcement of the pre-orders going live as a distraction from the awful publicity surrounding Silent Hill Ascension. I have already covered Silent Hill Ascension in a previous video, and for those who haven't seen it, I will link you that below. And so this video isn't about Ascension per se. No, this video is more about the handling of the core themes of the franchise and its identity, and how the writing of each game since the first 4 has been poorly handled by trying to emulate Silent Hill 2 in particular, without understanding what made it great. Silent Hill 1 in many ways is a far simpler story than Silent Hill 2. It's a story about a father trying to find his daughter, with some occultism and horror thrown in for good measure. But Silent Hill 2 was a more personal story, with the demons that James faced on his journey being those of his inner conflicts and his hidden trauma. And at the time this was an extraordinary piece of storytelling for gaming. But ever since Silent Hill 2, so many games have tried to copy this, but always fumbling the execution or just straight up being copies without the substance. Silent Hill Ascension is a very in-your-face example of this, and as such is a great entry point for this discussion today. And judging by the huge amount of comments I got on my Silent Hill Ascension video, many of you also share the same concern you have for the direction of the series. For how can a company like Konami allow this type of mishandling of their property to happen? Of course, each of these new projects stand alone, each developer is independent of one another, and the failings of Ascension are nothing to do with Bloober team or No Code, but it understandably leaves people to question Konami's direction for this franchise, especially after a decade or so of poor titles that preceded Ascension as well. Having an "It's Trauma" emote, and repeatedly telling us through the marketing that this game is about trauma and guilt, is such a transparent attempt to convince the audience that this is a meaningful story, by turning pain into a sort of affectation that the game rams down our throat, basically grabbing and shaking us to tell us that it is about trauma and it is super deep and meaningful. And not only is this super cringe and lazy, but it could also be offensive to people who have actually suffered real life-altering trauma in their life, by grossly misrepresenting what trauma actually is and just using it as an easy way to win claps when making a game. But Ascension is just like the other games that have come after The Room that are painfully trying to copy the magic formula of Silent Hill 2 to make it meaningful. But Silent Hill Ascension wears trauma like a t-shirt, like a hair dye. To Ascension and the Western developed games, trauma is just a theme to invoke at a surface level. It's almost this fetishization of trauma, rather than exploring it in a deep and meaningful way via intelligent writing. It's surprising that the writing is so mid in Silent Hill Ascension especially, given the writers seem to be ex-Telltale staff, Telltale being a company that specialised in storytelling. Though its weaknesses, Silent Hill Ascension's storytelling weaknesses, are definitely accentuated by the surrounding systems of Silent Hill Ascension that just make it all the more offensive. I imagine if Silent Hill Ascension was just a complete game that told the same story, it wouldn't be as bad. However, the writing is sloppy, and I maybe will break down the writing later on when we've had a few more episodes. But it's this cheap handling of the greater themes of trauma and grief that have people worried about Konami's steering of this ship, so to speak. And in particular, it has myself and others concerned about the presentation of the Silent Hill 2 remake, especially when you consider who the team are that are handling this remake. Bloober team. A team with a history of making good-looking games, yes, but they certainly are also a studio that has a history of sloppy writing, and certainly have been guilty of fetishizing trauma and guilt, and bungling handling of delicate themes, with a couple of their games blatantly being copies of Silent Hill, and not good ones in terms of writing. But more on that soon. In the original Silent Hill 2, the big twist was so perfectly done, and of course we cannot expect Bloober to recreate that. Because it was a product of its time, we weren't expecting that in a game, and there's even something to be said for the graphics of that era that contributed to James's inscrutable face. He was totally unreadable, and given that graphics are more realistic now, it would be far more difficult to recreate that effect, that persona. So I certainly do admit that there are some issues outside of Bloober's control in regards to getting this game right. But ultimately what made James such a great character for Silent Hill 2 was that he was pretty bland. That was done on purpose. He was unreadable to the point where on your first playthrough you weren't really assessing him much while you were trying to play the game and just survive. And as the story progresses, James just seems detached from reality and the horror around him. This certainly is not the case when we consider James in the remake, what we've seen so far in the trailers anyway. He is sweaty, he's nervous. Even if you weren't familiar with this story at all, and you saw this trailer, you could see that this was a troubled man. That absolutely would not be the case had you looked at the original cinematics of the original game. In fact, the vast majority of the trailer reveal that we got is focusing on James's tormented face. It's again this fetishization of agony and pain, and this is very much a Bloober classic. So let's talk about Bloober's history, and why I think their history of game development makes it quite likely that they will be clumsy in their presentation of this classic story. For those unaware, Bloober has developed a number of horror games, like Layers of Fear 1 and 2, Observer, The Blair Witch, and The Medium. In a lot of ways, Bloober has already been trying to emulate the magic of Silent Hill for years. Silent Hill 2 Remake is just the dream job of theirs. Layers of Fear is absolutely emulating PT, and capitalised on the walking simulator craze that sprouted up after PT's release. And then you have The Medium, which is clearly Bloober's attempt at a Silent Hill 2 type story. And don't get me wrong, I've played both of these games and I enjoyed them for what they were. Layers of Fear had a great atmosphere, and The Medium had some clever mechanics. But they are both so obviously an attempt to emulate different Silent Hill titles to the point that it's painful, and as such it runs into the issues that we've already discussed, the fetishization and romanticising of trauma without exploring it in a meaningful way. And so both of these games have the feeling that the writers think they are far more clever than they are, and it just comes across as cheap, and doesn't tackle any of these subjects in a respectful or meaningful way. For example, The Medium in particular cleaves very close to the story of Silent Hill 2. Marianne, the main character, is called back to a location from her past, and the monster that she has to overcome is the manifestation of, you guessed it, someone's repressed trauma. Just slap in some repressed trauma and you have an instant classic on your hands.
Silent Hill Ascension follows characters from locations around the world tormented by new and terrifying Silent Hill monsters. Lurking in the shadows, these monsters threaten to consume people and their children as they're drawn into the darkness by both recent murders and long-suppressed guilt and fears.
The game handles really difficult subjects like child abuse, but it has been criticised for the way that it handles such delicate subjects. The channel MurtKK is excellent at covering these types of topics, and has a great video on both the Medium and the Blair Witch, and I would highly recommend both of these videos. But I will summarise some of Murt's main points on the Medium. There is a character in the Medium called Richard, and Richard is inappropriate with a child throughout the story. The game frames this evil act as a sort of demon within Richard that he has no control over. In fact, this demon has taken over his body, and he has to helplessly watch as he commits these unspeakable acts. And the only reason he commits these acts, and the reason that this demon grew within him in the first place, is because he himself was a victim of trauma, and essentially he had no choice to do what he did. And the game also goes on to suggest that trauma creates further trauma, and that this cycle of trauma can only end with death. This is a sort of bizarre message to give within a game that's trying to tastefully handle the ideas of trauma. Not only is it suggesting that trauma victims are irredeemable, but it's also giving an excuse to a terrible person that he had no choice. There's a sort of determinism involved within his life. Murt then concludes her video by putting into words what I'm sure many of us feel about these tired tropes about trauma that are trotted out in a lazy attempt to make your writing appear as deep.
I think often game developers get a lot of free brownie points when they make games about mental health and trauma. Smack some dark themes into a game and people will defend it forever for raising awareness or tackling difficult subjects, no matter how well it's done. It's a cop-out of any due criticism levelled at a story, and a lazy one at that. Presentation matters.
Again, massive shout out to MurtKK, and I would highly recommend you check out their channel if you're more interested in these types of subjects and reviews. And I think she nails it on the head here. You can make games that deal with these subject matter, and games have and have done it well, like Silent Hill 2. But Silent Hill has lost something since Silent Hill 1, 2, 3 and The Room. It's the presentation. You can't just slap the word trauma in our face and expect us to clap like seals about how brave and avant-garde your writing is. Okay, but what has this got to do with the Silent Hill 2 remake? I'm talking about Bloober's old work after all. And at the end of the day, Silent Hill 2 is already a written story, and Bloober just have to pretty up a little bit. And yes, of course you're right. The outline of the game will still be decent, and I have little doubt that in a technical, graphical and gameplay sense, the Silent Hill 2 remake will be pretty great. It looks good in the trailer, and for all the issues I have with Bloober games, graphical fidelity and art direction are not one of them. But Bloober's history of the fetishization of grief and mental illnesses concerns me, and the focus of James's twitchy, tired, sweaty and gaunt face in the trailer is a red flag. Never mind the overdramatic focus on his face throughout the entire trailer. We barely see anything else in this trailer apart from James and his sad face. Even if you don't care about how this subject matter could be offensive to people, I think you would agree that we're just getting bored of it. It's such a crutch for lazy, poor writing. I'm not going to see the word trauma and be standing up giving a standing ovation. And while Silent Hill 2 will be safe in regards to the core of its writing and structure, it may not be safe from Bloober putting the emphasis on the wrong areas, instead of letting the nuanced tale of a conflicted man come to the fore naturally. And this has been a fear for a while, and Ascension and Bloober's past does little to alleviate that fear. Look, this video isn't all doom and gloom. I am certainly capable of being wrong. After all, Silent Hill 2 Remake isn't out yet, and I could be completely wrong and it's an absolute banger. As Bloober also made the game Observer, a game that is generally well regarded, though I haven't played it myself. And I was also deeply concerned about the Dead Space remake this year, and I absolutely love it. So here's hoping that Silent Hill 2 Remake is just as successful. Some of the OGs of Silent Hill team are also involved, including Masahiro Ito, and presumably their presence, especially someone like Masahiro Ito, who is very, very much a purist about what the original Silent Hills are about, means that this won't go too off course. But at the end of the day, Silent Hill 2 is just a remake of an already classic game. To move the franchise forward, to actually put Silent Hill back on the map. We need new stories. And while Ascension has failed to add anything meaningful, Townfall and Silent Hill F both have a lot of promise. Townfall is said to be the start of an episodic series, so self-contained games like an anthology, think Dark Pictures anthology for example. And going by the trailer, it seems that No Code, the developers, have nailed down a really cool aesthetic. They are also a Scottish developer as well, so yay, go Scotland. I think what most people are excited for, however, is Silent Hill F, and this is the next mainline game. And it's set not in America for once, but in 1960 Japan, and this is a really cool way to go. The game's trailer showed that it has a really unique aesthetic and feel, and this is exactly what Silent Hill needs. Stop trying to recreate Silent Hill 2 and capture this inner struggle suppressed trauma thing. That's done. Tell us a brand new story, with new themes and good writing. I think the latter is certainly something people are confident in, as Silent Hill F is being written by Ryakishi07, the creator of the They Cry series, so an experienced writer, which is absolutely what the series needs. It needs some good writers. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say, to give voice to frustrations that myself and others are having with this series and horror in general. Stop trying to redo Silent Hill 2 if you haven't got anything meaningful to say about trauma and guilt. Don't just try and replicate it. But anyway, let me know your thoughts below, guys. Do you think I'm completely wrong? Do you think that the writing in some of these games are absolutely stellar and I'm just missing the point of it? Or like me, are you tired of them just trotting out the suppressed trauma and guilt storyline every single time? Not just in the Silent Hill series, but in other horror games. And let me know what you think the series needs down below. But until next time, guys, I will see you in the Silent Hill Ascension chat rooms. Take care, and have a wonderful emote.